England have wrapped up their series in Sri Lanka. They've won the two-test series 2-0, which on the face of it looks quite impressive. But is that proper preparation for the real test, which is India? Now, joining me is the Daily Mail head cricket writer, Paul Newman. And I'm keen to get Paul's thoughts on what he saw that was good and bad in Sri Lanka. And is it really going to help us when we take on the Indians, who have got their tails up after that fantastic series in Australia?
Yes, Darren. Well, I think it's a great start to what's going to be England's busiest ever year, really. They're going to play 17 test matches, culminating the Ashes. We've got a World T20 in India in October. So I think this was a series that they had to win, really, because everything is going to get so much tougher from here. But having said that, even though this is not a vintage Sri Lankan side, it's still not an easy assignment by any means, because the conditions there are so alien to our players. They're still very good spin bowlers and players of spin. So I think we shouldn't take it too lightly that England won 2-0. They won 2-0 almost totally down to Joe Root, really, with two of the greatest of his 19 Test hundreds. I think he touched true greatness in this series. But there were some other very good, encouraging performances too. So I think England did all they had to do. They did lose both tosses, and history will tell you that Galle is one of the most toss-friendly venues in world cricket. You win the toss there, you normally win the match. So we shouldn't underestimate it. But as you rightly say, how much preparation that will be for India, we'll see in the next few weeks. But I think if we treat them as almost like warm-up matches for India, even though they were test matches, they were highly satisfactory ones.
The conditions, obviously we're in this whole new COVID world. From what you've been noticing since last July when Test cricket resumed, has it affected performances, or has it affected the way players are going about things?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the cricket has been of a very high quality, actually. I mean, all things considered, last summer, that, as you say, they played 6 test matches without any fans in attendance against West Indies and Pakistan. And the standards were very high. Obviously crowds were hugely missed. And you think of Stuart taking his 500th Test wicket, Jimmy Anderson taking his 600th. You think of that wonderful stand between Joe Buttler and Chris Woakes on the Saturday at Old Trafford to win the first Test against Pakistan against all the odds. And I remember that day just looking over to that huge temporary stand, party stand is at Old Trafford, and you think, wow, that place would be rocking now. But all things considered, I think the players have risen to the challenge remarkably well, and the standard of the cricket has been high. And clearly, it's not easy in these bubbles. People might say, oh, well, get on with it. You're playing cricket. A lot of people are a lot worse off in this COVID world, and of course they are. But they are spending weeks on end in a very artificial environment, not mixing with people, weeks on end in hotel rooms. Last summer, the hotel rooms, where hotels were on site at GS Bowl and Old Trafford. So they never could escape the cricket ground. And I think it is mentally tough. It's mentally tough for them. They've got a very demanding itinerary. And they've done it very professionally. The ECB have done it incredibly well, in that when you think back to last summer, there wasn't one positive COVID test amongst players, officials, media, ground staff, catering staff, everybody involved, which is extraordinary, really, when you see subsequent problems that football and rugby, as 2 examples, have had. So all things considered, I think cricket is very much doing its bit to get everybody through these tough times, and doing it remarkably well.
Do you think there's positives that can be gained out of this situation? And I think we're starting to see that in terms of squad rotation, giving people a rest and opportunities to people that have been knocking on the door for a while and all of a sudden are going to get a chance.
Yeah, it's certainly contentious that England are going to India for 4 tests against, the best, arguably, I know New Zealand are top of the rankings, but India are arguably the best team in the world. They just had, as you mentioned earlier, Darren, that incredible win in Australia. And we're not taking our first choice side. Now, most of the top players are there for this one, but for the first 2 tests, they've left, Jonny Bairstow at home, even though he showed himself to be one of England's best red ball players of spin, I think, in these 2 Sri Lanka tests. They're also giving rest to Mark Wood and Sam Curran. Obviously, Ben Stokes and Jofra Archer are back, which is huge. But I do think it's contentious that we're going there. And after the first test, Joe Buttler's coming home and going to miss the last 3. Now, that is a blow, because he really is looking like a test class player now. We know that he's class in white ball cricket. We know he's one of the best players in the world in white ball cricket. But in the last 6 months, since the cricket has come back in this COVID world, he's really looked at a test class player as well. And now he's coming home after first test in India. So it's contentious. it is, you know, a unique situation. And as we've said earlier, it's an incredibly busy year, and you have to bear in mind people's mental health, and you have to bear in mind the demands on them. The one thing I would say, and this is probably speaking as an old fogey, but the multi-format players will still go to the IPL, and they're going to miss test matches, but they will still play in the IPL in April and May. And now that doesn't sit too comfortably with me. I just think, I know that even I, you know, as an old-fashioned test devotee, appreciate that the IPL has helped our white ball game, but appreciate that it played a part in England winning the World Cup in 2019. But I just think in this year, when there's such demands to playing for the country, and we've seen that they can escape franchise contracts, because we saw Dan Lawrence and Jonny Bairstow pull out of the Big Bash at short notice. They really shouldn't be resting now. Joe Buttler shouldn't be missing 3 tests against India. Jonny Bairstow shouldn't be missing 2, even though he's not a test contract player. They should be playing for their country, and they should be missing the IPL. And then let's hope we're all back to normality next year, and we can resume the calendar as it was.
Yeah. I mean, the argument might be that England has one eye on the T20 World Cup, and that may be an excuse. And you know, you could use the argument that if you're going to get T20 experience, the IPL is the place to go and get it.
I can understand that. I can understand that. I mean, you've got the world's best players, haven't you? And it is in Indian conditions. But the one small thing, again, I'd say about that is that, you know, England came a freak-class over away from winning the last World T20 in India again in 2016. And that squad had very minimal IPL experience. So I do wonder sometimes, these players are extremely talented now. We've seen it in 50-over cricket. We've seen it in 20-over cricket. Yes, I do accept that it will help playing in Indian conditions before the World Cup. But I just think they've got enough experience in India now. They've got enough experience at the very highest levels of the game to be in very good shape for that World T20 in October, whether they play in the IPL or not.
How will playing the Indians be different to playing Sri Lanka? Obviously, the conditions are very, very different. Playing in Sri Lanka, I think until you've actually been there, you don't realise just quite how different the climates are between the two countries. But what other challenges playing India in India will be waiting for England?
It's a good point, isn't it? Because we think of both Sri Lanka and India as being very spin dominant, but India, you know, we've seen in recent times that the seam bowlers can do just as well there. And in Jasprit Bumrah, they've got, you know, arguably the best seam bowler in the world, haven't they, at the moment? You know, I know there's a lot of good ones about. So I think it will be different. It was interesting yesterday that Chris Silverwood did a press conference, and he said that they were still looking at playing 2 spinners. You know, we saw Jack Leach and Bess do well in the second innings in the second test in Sri Lanka, but generally in the series there were times when they seemed to be struggling for line and length, and they did seem a bit inexperienced, and people started to think, well, maybe England should play to their strengths in India and pick 4 seamers and a spinner and get Broad and Anderson back in the same side, which is something I didn't think, you know, they really should be looking to do overseas, but maybe that is the way to go with those 2 in such great form. But Chris Silverwood said yesterday that he did expect to play 2 spinners in Indian conditions. What we don't know, we know Chennai can be incredibly flat, of course. Last time there, England scored something like 479, I think, and we thought, oh, okay, they've done pretty well here. And then India scored in excess of 700, 750, I think it was, with Nair scoring a 100, whatever happened to him, and beat England by an innings. So even nearly 500 wasn't enough in batting first in Chennai. The unknown quantity will be Ahmedabad, because it's a new stadium. They play the last 2 tests there, and the first of those 2, the third in the series, is a day-night test with the pink ball as well. So it'll be very much an unknown quantity when Broad and Anderson and Jofra and Jofra Archer, Ben Stokes, all these people hopefully come back into the equation, and spin won't be so important. But I do understand this new stadium is 100,000 capacity. Obviously, you know, it's going to be, we think it's going to be behind closed doors, which again is a great shame. But the word is that they've got all these different pitches growing out the back. All, you know, and you've got a spin pitch, you've got a flat one, you've got a green seamer, and India can wheel out which pitch they want for that in whatever circumstance are in front of them. So yeah, I think the conditions will be different down to Sri Lanka, but also I think it would be wrong to predict and assume what those conditions are at the moment, and England need to be aware of any eventuality.
I'm an old fogey like you, and I think back to 10 years ago when England were out there and Alistair Cook and Kevin Peterson, and it was the first time we saw of the great top order that England had at that time. Do you have any concerns about the current top order and how they'll fare in India?
Funnily enough, I was talking to Andy Flower about that series yesterday for a feature that should be in the mail this week, and he was saying how tougher he thinks it will be for England this time than even it was for his team then. That was, I mean, they were still pretty much, England was still pretty much the best team in the Test team in the world at that stage. I think they'd got there the year previously, or they were there or thereabouts, and they lost the first Test in Ahmedabad by 9 wickets, I think it was, and we all thought, oh, here we go, we're going to lose 4-0. And Flower reminded us yesterday that he said at the time, well, judge us at the end of the series, don't write us off too soon. And we said, yeah, right, you're going to lose 4-0. And of course, they turned it round, and they turned it round brilliantly in Mumbai and Kolkata. And then Cook, as you say, Alistair Cook was incredible. 3 big centuries in that series. And Peterson played one of his greatest innings in Mumbai as well, a fantastic innings. And what happened there, which was really interesting, was after the first Test, India won with spin. They then decided to prepare even bigger turning pitches, real raging turners. And that played into England's hands remarkably, because they had Swan and Panazar, who were both at their absolute prime. And they won the series for England as much as Cook and Peterson did. And that's where it will be tougher here, I think, because, Leach and Bess are more inexperienced than Swan and Panazar. And of all that great team under Andrew Strauss and subsequently Alistair Cook, of all those great players in the Andy Flower era, I think the one that's missed the most is Graham Swan, because he was just such an incredible spinner. He could contain in the first innings and then attack in the second with equal skill. And really, they've not been able to replace him. And our domestic game perhaps doesn't help in that we punish Somerset for preparing turning pitches. Leach and Bess have both come out of Somerset, yet we penalise them. So it is an issue, and I think this Test will be tough for England, and tougher than perhaps that famous one was under Flower and Cook in 2012.
Moeen, was talking about spinners. Moeen missed out on the Sri Lanka games. Obviously, he tested negative for COVID on arrival. Do you think he's going to play a role in India?
I think he will. I think he's fit and available now. He's had a rough time. And he came through quarantine and he's building up his fitness. He did have mild symptoms of COVID, but he's come through those, I believe. And again, Chris Silverwood said yesterday that he's available and very much in contention for the first Test. And I think he might play ahead of Bess for his experience, really, and the fact that he is such a gifted player, Moeen. The one thing you'd look at is that he takes his wickets in India and previously at 65 apiece, I think it is, or 60 apiece. He's taken them against India pretty cheaply in England, actually. He's got a good record against India. But you look at Moeen's figures, and he's a really good spin bowler, as well as being an incredibly gifted batsman. And we haven't seen him in Test cricket for a while. He lost confidence. He dropped out of Test cricket. I really hope that there is a sort of second coming for him in Test cricket, or third coming even, it might be, and that he does play a part in this series. Bess would be unlucky. If he's a developing player, he's a three-dimensional player. England like him, and he's clearly learning on the job at the highest level. But it might well be that Moeen comes back to add a bit of depth to that batting and is the second spinner to Jack Leach in that first Test in Chennai next week. And I'd like to see it happen, because he's an extremely good cricketer and a really nice guy.
I think he's also a big part of the dressing room as well, Moeen, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's a big character in the dressing room. He's got a great sense of humour. He's, they all love him, really, and I think they would all love to have him back in the side. He's had a tough time, hasn't he? Because he lost his place in the 50-over side during the World Cup tournament, didn't play in the final. He dropped out of Test cricket, and he got some 2020 runs, if I remember rightly, in the summer in one game against Australia, I think it was. It may have even been the last one against Pakistan. But in all 3 formats, he's not been the player he was. So it's a pretty vital time in his career, actually. He's now fully fit. They've arrived in India. He's fully fit. And now it's almost now or never for him. What is he, 34? So the next year or so, I think he must be 34. So the next year or so, we'll decide what sort of future Moeen Ali has in the England side. And he could well be a part of, an England team that wins in India, wins the Ashes, and wins another World Cup, or he could just sort of fade away now, and that would be a great shame if he does.
He's been around a while now, isn't he? About 7 years, 7 years in the England side, one form or another.
Yeah, he came into the side after that disastrous Ashes of 2013-14. I think the following summer he came into the side and immediately looked a very classy stroke player. More a batsman who bowled a little bit at that stage, and we've seen him be more of a spinner, more of a batsman. We've seen him up and down the order. He hasn't been helped sometimes. He's batted from 1 to 8, I think, or even 9. and he's very selfless, and he'll bat anywhere for the team, and he likes to be the second spinner. I think, I'm not sure he likes the responsibility of being the number one spinner at times. It adds to the pressure, because I don't think he's ever thought of himself as a proper frontline bowler. But if you look at his stats and you look at what he's done with the ball, he's not far behind, England's best spinners of all time. So he should think of himself as a decent bowler, and I would hope he has the confidence to really grasp the ball by the horns now and have a sort of golden last couple of years in the England setup. So that'd be lovely to see.
Yeah. And I can't have this conversation with you without talking about Dan Lawrence. What are your thoughts on him?
Oh, it was excellent, wasn't it? It was an excellent debut. I'm a big fan of his. Already, obviously he's from Essex and he comes from Chingford, where I live. So he's very much one of our own, as far as I'm concerned. Followed his progress over the last few years, and with Essex and with England age groups, the Lions. Interviewed him a couple of times last year when he's been great to interview. Clearly a confident lad, but in a good way. There's no unpleasantness about it. There's no arrogance about it. He just spoke so well and so confidently for a young lad. You think, this lad's got something. And I remember speaking to Chris Silverwood about him last year, and his eyes almost lit up when the name Dan Lawrence was made. He said, he's going to be special. And he comes into the England side, and you do wonder, don't you? There's a lot of hype. You've seen him do it at county and Lions level. We also saw how Wesley went, who was a leg side player, and a lot of Essex people thought he was going to do very well at Test cricket, and he didn't. I mean, whether he was unlucky or not, I don't know, but he drifted away from the international scene. But Dan Lawrence immediately looked to the manner born in that first Test. I know he had a more difficult second Test, but he really did, and I'm convinced he's going to have a really successful career.
I like the way that England have nurtured him. Similarly, in the way that Essex did. I remember Dan being part of team photographs and media days as a 16-year-old, maybe even 15, and being kind of integrated in so that when he got his chance, it wouldn't feel like such a big thing. And I feel that that's been mirrored with England, the Lions and coming through that way and shadowing the first team and being part of the squad, so that when he's given the chance, he's not the rabbit in the headlights.
Exactly, and they're good at that these days. I mean, they're a very impressive England setup in so many ways. They do a lot of things right, and they have handled him well. But at the same time, with all that planning, with all that handling, until the guy actually gets out there in difficult conditions, you just don't know, do you? And the way he played in that first innings to get 73 in the first Test, and most impressively, the way he just guided England home with Bairstow in the second innings of that first Test, even though they were 14 for 3, I think, when Joe Root was run out. And it could easily been a catastrophe, but he just looked calm. He smiled his way through it. That slog swept 6 in the first innings was a hell of a shot. And he's standing, people talk of him being a leg side Larry. They talk of him being unorthodox. But in that first innings when he scored 73 in the first Test, he looked pretty orthodox to me. He played with flair, yes, but he was standing very still at the crease. He's talked about this change in his trigger movements he's made over the last year or so. And he was playing pretty orthodoxly, but also with real flair. But I think most importantly with him is his temperament and character. He says, this is where I want to be. This is where I've always planned and hoped to be. And he deserves to be there. And it's a great story, listening to his dad on Test Match Special, the groundsman at Chingford. He seemed a real character. We know his younger brother is a professional wrestler known as David Beckham. There's a nod to Chingford's finest, David Beckham. So he's got everything going for him, young Dan. And it's interesting to see if he makes the first Test team in Chennai next week, because obviously now we've got Stokes, Burns, and probably Pope all coming back. Pope looks like he's going to be fit. So interesting to see where Dan fits in. But I've got a hunch he'll still play, maybe even at 6, but he'll still play. Because I would have thought that England would like to give him a run in the side now.
And Sibley and Crawley to open?
Sibley and Burns, I think. I think it'll be Sibley and Burns with Crawley at 3. Then Root, of course, and then you've got, I think it'll be Stokes, Lawrence, Buttler, Moeen, Leach, Archer, Anderson. Does that sound right? That'd be Anderson stroke Broad. That'd be my guess at this stage, a week or so before the first Test of how they might line up.
I like that, because everyone seems to be in their natural position, if that would be the order.
Well, that's one of Silverwood's big things, isn't it? Ever since he came into side, we know that Trevor Bayliss used to like a very positive style of first-class cricket. Chris Silverwood came in and said, look, we want square pegs in square holes. We want to pick openers who lay the foundations old fashioned. He always says it's not rocket science. We try and see off the shine, as openers used to do, put big runs on the board, and then bowl with discipline to take 20 wickets. And it's really working in Test cricket. A nod to Chris as well, as a former Essex coach. He took the top job after Bayliss had been pretty successful. He had a difficult first series in New Zealand, only a 2-test series. They lost that. But since then, they've gone from strength to strength, and they've won 4 test series in a row. Now, obviously, it's going to get tougher. India away and then home. New Zealand have popped up for 2 tests in June. And then, of course, it all ends with the Ashes, which this year all ends with the Ashes, which is still the biggest deal in cricket as far as I'm concerned. The Ashes brand, bigger than ever. We hate the Aussies more than ever.
They hate everyone more than ever.
But they certainly hate us more than ever. And if England come through this year having, won, Ashes, World Cup against India, then I think it will be Sir Chris Silverwood of Chelmsford.
Well, I think we saw that when Silvers took over at Essex, and there was that almost immediate turnaround of promotion from Division 2. Silverwood equals silverware, but also what a great manager he is as well. I mean, he really does know how to, get the best out of people. And I think from what I gather, on and off the field as well, it's not just with the players that he has this influence. I think in everyone around him, he just radiates that confidence, if you like.
Yes, it's a calm authority, isn't it? He's not a demonstrative man. He wouldn't, if you see him in a media conference or you see him on TV, he doesn't necessarily have this presence or aura, but he just has a quiet authority about him. I think he just knows what he's doing. And he said to me when he first took over that his aim was to be a more successful England coach than it was player. And yesterday he said, well, he's done that already, because he didn't have the longest of playing careers for England. He was a pretty fast bowler in his day, but he's been a fabulous success. I wouldn't personally like to criticise Paul Grayson too much, who was a good friend of mine and had a long spell in charge, but it's absolutely true to say that things did turn around as soon as Chris took over, and it's been carried on by Anthony McGrath, and that's been, it's been a huge success story for Essex, and hopefully now it's becoming a huge success story for England as well.
You mentioned Chris's playing career, and I remember him getting his first cap at Lord's. And do you remember who was alongside him getting his first cap that day?
Oh, now then, let's think about that. Wasn't Jimmy Anderson, was it?
It was Jimmy Anderson.
Oh, was it? That's that game against Zimbabwe, 2003.
Yeah.
I know Silvers says that the only winning test he had, the only test that he played in that England won, was the Hansi Cronje corrupt test at Centurion. Yeah. So I think that's a bit of a thing that he's always wanted to overcome as well. The one time he did taste victory for England, it turned out to be in sort of dodgy circumstances. So I think that's given him even more passion to be a success as a coach of England.
And a quick word on Jimmy. Evergreen.
Oh, amazing. Just amazing. 38 years old, to take 6 wickets like that in the first innings in Sri Lanka. What's he on now? 606, isn't it? Oh no, we took he didn't take any in the second innings. Of course he didn't. They all went to spin. So just incredible. He gets better. I called him the Benjamin Button of cricket. He just seems to be getting better as he's got older, or Peter Pan, if you like. He's as fit. He's fitter than ever. He's bowling better than ever. He's more skillful in overseas conditions than ever. It was always unfair to say that he could only swing the Duke's ball at home. That's the only way to take wickets. That was always wrong. But he just gets better and better. And even his hair's getting darker. I don't know how he's managing that. But you don't even see any flecks of grey now that you saw a couple of years ago. So maybe that's chemically helped. I don't know. But anyway, it absolutely incredible. Now you would think, the last couple of years, will Jimmy make the next Ashes? Of course he will now. And Jimmy has always said, well, why stop at the Ashes? Why can't I go on? And he's blessed with such a sort of live body that doesn't appear to be, prone to putting on weight or breaking down. He got his serious injuries out of the way when he was young. And he's just defying time now, really. And who's to say he won't go on for another couple of years and get over 700 wickets? It'd be incredible. But he really is getting better than ever, and we should appreciate him every last bit while he's still playing.
Right, before you go, there's a one in the year.
Yes.
I think are we going to see Jose Mourinho's Tottenham win something? Because when there's a one in the year, Spurs always do the business, don't they?
Well, it hasn't happened in 2001 and 2011, to be fair, but it happened. We haven't won anything since 2008 now, it hasn't happened for a long while. But it did used to happen. It did used to happen regularly, and of course, this year is the 40-year anniversary of the famous Ricky Villiers Cup final win. That was '81 when Spurs beat Man City. And now we're playing Man City in the League Cup final. So maybe that's an omen. But I'm one of these Spurs fans who still can't quite get used to Jose. The style of football. We've thrown away so many points by trying to sit back and defend a 1-goal lead, including against your own Crystal Palace. And we just, it just baffles you. You think, for goodness sake, attack more. So I'm still not totally convinced by him. But what you would say is that he does have this incredible record of winning tonies. We're still in the FA Cup. We're still in the Europa League. We're in the League Cup final, and we're there or thereabouts in the league. So if we beat Liverpool tonight, I think, when this goes out. That would mean we're still very much in the title race. So even I can't knock Jose, but I don't think Spurs fans used to sing "Man in Raincoats, Blue and White Army" to George Graham because they could never bring themselves to sing his name. And it'd be fascinating to see whether they'd be singing Jose's name if we were in the stadium at the moment. My hunch is a lot of people would still be getting a bit frustrated by the style of football. But to be fair to him, we haven't won the league since '61, so if he won that, I'd happily shout his name to the rooftops.
All right, Paul, been an absolute pleasure as always. Talking to you on 98 Not Out, and we appreciate your ongoing and continued support for us. It really is truly appreciated, and hopefully you'll enjoy the series and maybe look forward to getting back and watching some cricket live this summer in this country.
Well, before I go, Darren, could I just congratulate you as well? Because, I came in a couple of times when you were at the start of this journey and you've just been incredible. To say you've made progress is an understatement. The quality of the guests you're getting on, you continue to amaze me when I see on Twitter who's coming in this week, and you've done incredibly well. And I'm proud to have been in towards the start, that you asked me in then, and I'm proud that you're still asking me now. You're getting so many good guests in now. You've moved beyond the likes of me, honestly. But it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm very much looking forward to the India series. Hopefully, we can see it on the telly. I don't think there's a deal been done yet. It's weird.
They're arguing about it still, I think. Or sorry, negotiating. Yeah. Right word.
Hot Star or something. But anyway, hopefully that gets settled because at the moment, journalists are covering Test matches off the telly because that's the only way we can do it. So it'd be very hard if we can't see the pictures. But let's just keep our fingers crossed. We're all back in cricket stadiums this summer because that's what we really want.